Hi, it's Chris from Sallyforth here. Today we're going to be taking a look at putting together a stream tile like this using a Sallyforth Terra-Former Kit. You might remember in a previous video we'd covered assembling a Terra-Former tile, gluing the pieces together, gluing the magnets in, doing the sort of basic sculpting of the landform. So what we're going to do today is to go from this stage to this stage, completed sort of gaming tile. Previously we'd fitted the piece of polystyrene, we'd carved the stream profile out with a craft knife, and I've gone over, as you can see, I've gone over the texture of the tile to create a bit of undulation with a hot air gun. When that was completed, I'd used some ready mix filler and just run my finger around the edges to fill any gaps. So you can see, we can see the edges of where the filler's been. So I'm just going to get a bit more filler and blend it in nicely. So when we've covered it with our texture material, we're not going to be able to see the edge of it. So this is best done in a sort of a two-stage process of filling the gap and then just blending it in. So the next thing that we're going to do is add some rocks and stones to give a bit of interest to our riverbed. Two different products that we're going to use. This stuff here is bark chippings, and here we've got a pot with some fine gravel. So both of those were picked up from the local garden centre. The bark chippings make some nice big sized rocks to go on the board. So I'm going to use some of my ready mix filler as a kind of a sort of cementy glue to sort of fix them in place. So put a good smearing on, and I'm going to find a place where it looks natural, and then just push it down into the filler. So once we've got the larger bits of bark in place, we'll then glue some sort of smaller bits of gravel around to represent the sort of smaller stones and boulders. So I'm just using some PVA glue and just going to put some glue in the places where I want them. We need to create a bit of interest around the larger rocks. And then just take some of the gravel and push it in to the filler that's around the outside and the glue. So don't need to be too precise. Some of them will fall off, and that's fine. Okay, so we've got our rocks and boulders stuck down. Next thing that we're going to do is to texture the area either side of the stream with some textured material. So this is what I use. It's a mixture of sand, gravel, cork bark, sort of any bits and pieces that are left over go in there, and it gives groundwork a nice texture that can dry brush up. So all I'm doing is using some PVA glue and I'm going to put a good coating of PVA glue all over the ground. Okay, so we've now got a nice ground texture onto the board, and what we need to do next is to sort of smooth off the bottom of the stream. So to do that, I'm going to use some Tetrion filler. Now, other brands of filler are available. I've mixed it up with some water to a nice sort of thick, double creamy sort of consistency, and I'm just going to sort of brush that across the bottom, the bottom of the stream. The plaster is dried nicely in the stream to form a nice sort of flowing water sort of texture. So the next thing to do is to base coat the board. So before we do that, I always like to use either a surf form or some sandpaper and just give the edges a quick file, just to see if there's any sand or plaster that's going to sort of stop the boards from fitting tightly together. But once we've done that, the next stage is to paint it. So I'm using some Santex bitter chocolate, and we're just going to give it a really good coating of paint all the way over, and this just sort of blends everything together and gives us a good surface to either flock or dry brush up the terrain. So here's our tile that we painted with this bitter chocolate masonry paint. We've waited for it to be completely dry, so our dry brushing doesn't pick up any damp paint. So what we're using for painting the tiles is an assortment of household emulsion and Santex masonry paint. So this has a really good consistency for dry brushing, it's very durable, and it's a lot cheaper than hobby paints. So I've got a piece of a scrap corrugated card here, and what I'm going to do is get some of my masonry paint out and work it into the cardboard to get most of the paint off of the brush. So what we're looking for is somewhere between a dry brush and a damp brush that's going to pick up the raised detail but leave some of the dark brown bitter chocolate in the shadowy recesses, so we get a nice texture. And we're just heading for the rocky areas and picking them up with the dry brush. Right, now looking to put a little bit of redness into the soil. Now I like that around the riverbanks and on the roads. So once again, we're using some masonry paint. Got a little bit out onto our card, and try not to get any on the rocks. We just put in a little bit of a red dry brush, brick red dry brush, to give a bit of detail to our stream bed. The next colour we're going to add is a dulux colour called Salisbury Stone. So any kind of caramelly sort of brown is going to do. Once again, we're going to put the paint onto a piece of card, brush most of it off, and then dry brush both over the rocky bits and along the earthy bank to kind of start bringing the colours together. So we don't want to be dry brushing as heavily as with the first coat, because what we're looking for is some of the original colours to be showing through. Okay, so the last thing we're going to do on the rocky bit is final highlight using Santex Ivory Stone. So once again, put a bit on the card, wiped most of it off, and then just a nice light dry brush just to highlight the rocks and the earthy soily bit. And there we are, ready to move on to the grass next. Okay, so we've got the rocks and the stream done. So the next bit is to paint the sort of the grassy patch. I always find it quite helpful to have a tile that I've already painted, and to try and get a sort of a match on the strength of the dry brushing. So what we're using, you don't use so much paint when you're dry brushing. You can use these sort of match pots. So I've got two different tones of green. This one is called Enchanted Eden, which is the darker coat that I put on first. And this coat is Easy Peasy, which is a sort of a lighter green. And then we have a very light dry brush of yellow on the top, which is Prairie Gold. Okay, so we've got our grassland painted. The next thing is to put a base coat onto the stream. So for this, once again I'm using some household emulsion. This is called Trailing Ivy, which is a nice kind of greeny bluey watercolour. So using a number 8 brush and just basically painting over where we want the stream to be. Okay, so we've got a stream painted, and we're just going to use some white paint just to dry brush and pick up a few highlights to suggest moving water. Okay, so we've got some highlights on the stream. The last thing that we're going to do is use some Army Painter Quick Shade, and this is like a very glossy varnish with some black wash in it, just to paint over the stream to give it a bit of depth and shine. So here's the finished tile. The only extra thing that I've done is put a coat of gloss varnish over the top of the river and some grass tufts along the side of the stream for a bit of foliage, and there we are, another board ready for use.